Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about 5-piece striker, the build I've put together that's mainly focused on PvE, but it does translate to PvP. I'm going to talk about my gear, I'll talk about my weapons, I'll move on to my skills, my talents, and then my character sheet, and I'll throw it to some gameplay. What I have for you tonight is actually some underground gameplay. I don't have any PvP stuff, but I'll talk about specifically what you need to change in order to make it competitive in PvP. And I do know for a fact that there's a lot of players, using this to devastating results, so it is competitive in PvP. I have killed players with it, I just unfortunately wasn't recording at the time. However, I can show you the devastating potential of it in PvE when augmented by the correct squad, and even by yourself if used properly. So I'm going to talk about all the striker stuff, then I'll talk about the gloves, talk about the weapons, etc. Starting off with my chest piece, I actually have a striker's harness with a lot of stamina, nearly a perfect roll, and then 2 stamina mods with skill power in it. I feel like those are the best mods to run. You want to increase your toughness, you also want to increase your skill power so that your skills have lower cooldowns, so that your heal hits for more, all these different things. Skill power is one of the best things to have on mods. You definitely need armor on your chest piece. For anyone that doesn't already know, the best way to achieve the armor cap of 5354, that's 5,354 armor to reach 75% mitigation, you definitely need it. You need armor on your chest piece and your holster. It's possible to achieve armor cap with just those 2 items having rolled armor. Otherwise, you may have to prioritize 1 or 2 mods in order to do so. I have a really great armor roll on the major attributes. I have some EDR. I think that that's definitely the thing you should pair with the armor on your chest piece. There's nothing else that's really going to take the cake, but if you are strictly PvE, then you could go protection from elites or something like that. That's really up to you. It's user's preference. Increased kill XP is kind of nice to have in the Dark Zone, but it's really not critical to the build. Turret health is entirely useless. And then I am actually using 5-piece striker, so I tick off all the bonuses. Now, this video is going to double as a 5-piece striker review, as well as a build video. So the 10% enemy armor damage is great for PvE, has absolutely no effect in PvP as of right now. The critical hit damage is great for both PvE and PvP. The 4-piece bonus is more potent in PvE than it is in PvP, but if used properly, it can actually have really, really powerful results in PvP. And then the 5-piece bonus is half good, half kind of mediocre. The 10% enemy armor damage is, again, great in PvE. However, the critical hit damage is the gem there, 30%, which is cross both, both in the Dark Zone and out of it against players and NPCs. So that's actually a very good thing. And if you're going to run 4-piece striker, I would strongly suggest running 5-piece. Now, moving on to my mask, I do not have critical hit chance on my mask. I have skill power. It's actually a better thing to roll, because if you do end up using pulse, the 5,000 skill power will give you more than what you would get from the critical hit chance anyways, and also makes your heal better, decreases your cooldowns. Increased kill XP, again, is kind of nice to have in the Dark Zone. This is kind of a build I'll be running if we are to actually, get an increased Dark Zone rank up to like 125 with 1.4, something like that. I'll run a build similar to this with a lot of increased kill XP, a lot of versatility, as in I can fight players if I encounter them. However, I will definitely be, shredding NPCs, which will be really good. Ballistic shield damage, not good at all. It's important to look for first aid self-heal or first aid ally heal, or something to do with pulse or smart cover if you're going to be running those in the skill attribute, but it's not the most critical thing to the build. Moving on to my pads, I have just basic striker's knee pads that have, a decent firearms roll. These could be much higher, but they get the job done. Critical hit damage you absolutely want. It's critical to the build. Now, you actually can roll armor if you absolutely need to. If you have not rolled armor on your chest piece and your holster and you can't for some reason, then you possibly could roll the armor here, but that critical hit damage is a very large chunk that you definitely want. Again, I have increased kill XP, which is really nice, and then 31% shock resistance makes this a little bit more versatile. In the Dark Zone, shock turrets are just phenomenally aggravating, and it's just horrible when you encounter them. So having some shock resistance on your pads, I would strongly suggest, and it's really nice. Smart cover damage resilience is good, but I would prefer actually something to do with first aid self-heal. But that does actually work for the way I'm going to be running the build in the gameplay footage I show after this. But pulse, again, something to do with that would be probably a little bit more valuable to me, since I'll more often than not be running pulse. Moving on to my backpack, I actually have opted to not run skill power on my backpack. I actually went for the large chunk of critical hit damage. You can definitely change this out. This is completely open to user's preference. It would make your heal better, it would decrease your cooldowns, and it's really nice to have. However, I have chosen not to do that. It's got a really nice stamina roll on the striker's backpack. This build actually is fully maxed out in terms of gear score, and that's one thing I'll touch on in a little bit, talking about people that kick based on gear score, and why you may actually want to just have some 255, or a build that gets you to 255 laying around just in case. But anyway, I'll touch on that later on. Ammo capacity is really nice. I prefer to have that because then I can switch everything except this backpack. I don't have to switch to the police backpack, which means I don't actually need to go down to 46 of 66 inventory slots. I don't need to have less items in my inventory. I just sacrifice maybe 25% ammo capacity, which is not a big deal. Smart cover duration is fantastic for this build. Ballistic shield health is, down the tubes. I don't really need that. Moving on to my holster, I have a Striker's holster. It has some good rolls across the board. Maybe stamina could be a little higher, but it doesn't really matter. Major attribute of armor, that's critical, and then first aid ally heal, which is great for supporting my teammates. First aid self heal will be more critical if I was surviving a PvP encounter, but first aid ally heal is really nice. So now I have my gloves. Now I only use these gloves right here because they are a perfect roll for a shotgun build, and this is using an SASG. So that's why I have these on. You could easily swap out for something like the Savage gloves if they had shotgun damage. If I could reroll SMG damage to shotgun damage, these would be great gloves. I could reroll maybe these ones too. I don't know. There's a lot of different things you could reroll. Health on kill, shotgun damage, pistol damage, I could reroll some things, but those are electronics gloves. So anyway, Savage gloves is something that would definitely help the build and bring it up to an even higher caliber. It already is quite functional, but if you have the ability to run Savage gloves instead of just a mismatched gear piece, that's fine as well. Also, if you were to switch these out for Strikers, gloves, you could then swap out for a Vigorous or Reckless chest piece, depending on your playstyle, and that would also bring the build up to an even higher caliber as well. It would be very, very nice. You would boost your damage and your survivability were you to choose, Vigorous and then Booster Shot, but those are just some small changes that can be made to the build. Moving on to my weapons, I am actually using an SASG, and that is what you should be using for PvE. Whenever you are fighting NPCs, you should be using a tactical SASG 12, not necessarily tactical, but always the SASG, because it has a very tight reticle, has a very nice rate of fire. You can stack your Striker's bonus extremely quickly. It also has a very decent mag size. Now, the talents I have on this are Deadly, Vicious, Competent. I would prefer Deadly, Brutal, Competent, but, Vicious works very well with Deadly, so it's not so bad, and it will actually shred NPCs all the same, even though I don't have Brutal. However, Brutal would increase the damage on the build if I were able to land those headshots, and as you'll see in the footage, the reticle is so small, I can land headshots, exclusively headshots, where all of the pellets land on the enemy NPC head from very, very far away. Now, the way you need to mod this is actually slightly different as well. What you're going to do is go for magazine-sized weapon damage. Of course, that's absolutely essential because you definitely want that magazine up over 10 into like 13, 14 range. And then weapon damage for sure because it already has high base damage and that scales very well. You're going to mod the underbarrel basically any way you want to. I would say if you're going to hit fire a lot, then go for that. But I go for stability accuracy. It's just kind of a blanket underbarrel mod that works quite well. And then for the scope, you can go with headshot damage, critical hit chance if you're unable to cap out with a pulse. But since you're probably able to cap out with pulse, that even a weaker pulse that your teammate has, you're going to go with accuracy headshot damage. So what this is going to allow you to do is have an even tighter reticle. Again, as you'll see in the gameplay footage, mine is, it's perfectly zoomed in on the head when I do it. And that's, going to allow you to stack the bonus better from farther away and give you more versatility. You don't have to get up close and personal on NPCs where they can actually kill you very quickly. You can stay farther back and still stack the bonus effectively. So the secondary is really up to you. I would say go for an M1A or a PP19. I have gone with a PP19 because it's really, really easy to stack your Striker bonus with that as well. And since either weapon is going to be able to stack the bonus, you get more use out of it in the end. You can use an M1A though for range or something like that. You can mod your PP19 differently and go for RPM and magazine size instead of weapon damage. However, I've opted for this because 53 is still plenty to stack well. And overall I get good results from it with Deadly, Unforgiving, and Hurried. That's nice. But I am going to be using my SASG for most of the fight. Moving on to my abilities. Now, a lot of people like to run Pulse. Sometimes when I go into the underground or I, opt for a heroic incursion or something like that, everybody's running Pulse and no one wants to switch it. And whenever I say, can we switch out some of the pulses, they'll say, no, I need to run this for my damage. That's fine. So I actually switched over to a mod, the mod Trapper, on my smart cover. Now, when the enemy NPCs get into Trapper, that's great. You can definitely opt for something else like Recharger, but, that's what I run right now is just Trapper. And then, as you can see, my smart cover is not maxed out, not even close. I get a 31% damage buff, I get 45% damage, resistance mitigation boost, and that is nice, but that's not capped out. If you have a capped out pulse, this build becomes that much better, and even when running a mediocre at best, a smart cover, I'm still achieving really high damage numbers really easily. Then I also run, heal with overdose, of course. That's how it's always going to go, unless you have booster shot with the vigorous chest piece. And then for my talents, I'm running triage. When I'm in a squad, I'm always running triage, always, always. Then I'm also running critical save. This is very, very helpful when surviving enemy shotgunners or any sort of burst damage from NPCs or players in the dark zone if you are going to be in there participating in PvP. And then I run strike back because getting your skills back faster is really nice. You can definitely run tech support, which means killing a hostile in your smart cover extends the duration. This is a very good talent to run as well. However, since I will be relocating often, I run strike back so that instead of just extending the duration of the smart cover, I have the ability to transition to a new location faster, which means in the underground or something like that where my teammates may go off on their own, I can go right over to them and keep dropping smart cover on their position in order to help them, rather than having to remain in one current position while they may move off and then they could get killed. They don't have the mitigation. I like to move with them, really fluidly. I also run one is none, of course, with a shotgun because it procs per pellet, and it's nearly 100% chance if you land a perfect headshot to not consume the bullet, which is really nice, especially with a modifier like one is none or something like that. So that's my talents. I'm actually going to go over my character sheet really quickly. Moving down here, you can see critical hit chance. Actually, that's definitely not right. Hold on, let me switch over. Sometimes when I'm holding the wrong gun, it doesn't work. Anyway, weapons. Right here we have critical hit damage at 186%, which is very nice, and headshot damage, which is at 71%. These could be higher. Again, if I had brutal, the headshot damage would be much more competitive. Critical hit damage should be up over 200%, but 186 still gets the job done. And with a shotgun, that's going to have some really, really hard-hitting pellets, even from range with the SASG. So I'm just going to quickly scroll through the rest of my character panel. As you can see, I am armor capped, 75%, and then all the way through all the rest. Now, I'm going to throw it to some gameplay, and then talk about, what's happening, how the build performs, etc., etc. Okay, so here we are in the underground, and I'm going to show you why I've opted to mod the gun the way I have, how quickly it can stack up the striker bonus. I throw down a grenade there, definitely start landing some shots, and as you can see, I've got almost a halfway filled striker bonus already, but the problem is that in a situation like that where his hitbox was in the way of my reticle, I lost that whole bonus. So I could have easily stacked up to 100% there over the course of just a few seconds. However, I fired into his back and didn't realize in time, and I shouldn't have done that because I lost the bonus. However, at range, as you can see there, I am very far away from the targets. Typically a shotgun would have, first of all, no damage from that range, and second of all, you would miss most of the pellets and not be able to stack any striker bonus. As you can see here, I've stacked well up over halfway on the striker bonus, which means 60, closer to 70 possibly % increased damage, which stacks on top of everything else. If I were running sentry, if my whole team was running sentry, we would triple mark a target, and then that would be it. We'd be at 52% increased damage for all of us to that target, and then it couldn't go any higher. You'd have to augment it with pulse and smart cover. With this build, I can achieve personally 100% increased damage to targets quite easily, and if someone with better aim than I do is actually going to achieve that even faster. As you can see there, I've basically capped out my striker's bonus, and that was not very hard to do at all. And then on top of that, if an enemy gets debuffed by a sentry marker, I will then be able to do 100% on top of the triple mark target for 52%, on top of the smart cover bonus, on top of the pulse, and this is actually a really good way to boost your damage up much higher than a sentry gun, sentry build can go. But you do need to have one in your, in your party. You need to have someone marking those targets in your party. That's the ideal way to go. However, if you don't have 4-piece sentry or 5-piece sentry or whatever, then this works quite well. As you can see from very far away, I am marking the target, or not marking target, but I'm gaining stacks. I'm getting all of the stacks that I need from extremely far away because of how tight the reticle gets. Now, as you can see, I'm in my smart cover. I have a fully stacked up, striker bonus. And then once I'm in my smart cover, I think I go to my inventory screen here in a couple seconds, and I just show that it's very easy to achieve, 400,000 DPS. And this is with a very mediocre smart cover. I think I go into it right now once I place the smart cover, and you'll see if I had a capped out smart cover, I'd be well up over 500,000 DPS. And I'm not going to advertise this. The title doesn't say, 500,000 or 400,000 DPS build, because that's not the baseline stats. That's, however, a very easily achievable bonus that you'll be getting most of the time when you're in PvE situations. So that's why I definitely wanted to make a note of it and talk about it, even though I'm not going to advertise it as such. As you can see there, with pellets hitting the head for 141,000, I think it was, and there's 8 of them. It's competitive with an M1A. It doesn't actually have the same kind of range that an M1A has, but from up close you can fire, just as fast, if not faster. Sometimes, because the M1A reticle bloom is so large that sometimes it may say 300 RPM, but it's not actually going to be accurate to that degree in terms of if you fire at its max RPM, you're going to be spamming shots all over the place. You're not going to be able to hit those headshots. With the SASG, that reticle stays extremely tight the entire time. So from very far away, I can keep landing shots. I can keep getting my bonus. I can keep doing maxed out damage. And even with my mediocre personal smart cover, I can just pop that down and then easily reach, a very tanky, toughness level, considering I have that bonus mitigation, and then also a very high damage output. So this is great for running around doing underground or missions with people you've never met before, or you know, if you're just going to matchmake. It's a competitive DPS build for people that want to run DPS builds. I enjoy it quite a bit, and actually to kind of touch on the 5-piece striker a little bit more, I think that is a very good gear set. I think that 5-piece striker right now is competitive. It's not meta breaking, it's not something that's going to take over, but it's competitive. And as soon as they start to rework other gear sets, I don't think that striker has anything in the works. To my knowledge, nobody's walking around saying, oh, striker's so overpowered, you need to nerf striker. No one's really saying that. I think that striker is in a good place, and I think that when other gear sets are adjusted, or even if the core features are changed in whatever way that they're planning, that striker will have an even greater place in the metagame. It's a very good gear set, and when used properly, it's extremely effective. So I wanted to touch on it, talk about the 5-piece, show some gameplay footage with a PvE build, you know, around it. Since striker is kind of one of the more versatile ones, it's not just for PvE and it's not just for PvP. As you know, Deadeye is something that's basically exclusively for PvP. If you're using it in PvE, you're definitely not achieving the full potential of the build or of the gear set, because you would definitely want to be using striker or sentry in an M1A for sure to get those headshots, you know, mark the target, and then deal greater increased damage. Deadeye is definitely excels in the dark zone. I think striker is one of the gear sets that excels in both. It excels in PvE and PvP. It's a really nice thing. You don't have to switch all of your gear when you go into the dark zone. If you encounter a player, I said I would touch on this, and I should. What you're going to want to do is switch from an SASG over to an M870 if you have a good roll on one, because the super high base damage coupled with the super high critical hit damage that you get from, you know, all the striker pieces is going to be really strong. And also, the M870 still works the same way as the SASG with stacking up your bonus. All the pellets stack the bonus, so even on players, if you're taking advantage of the aim assist, which I do frequently, I'm not the best at taking advantage of it. Some players are much better at using aim assist than I am, and there's definitely probably a change in the future coming to that. I think that if you use it properly on players, you can still use an M870, still stack up your striker bonus, and in the end be extremely competitive, because after 3 or 4 shots, it doesn't even rely on just headshots like the sentry does. You can still hit players in the body for huge amounts of damage when they're rolling away, things like that, and drop them. So it's a very competitive PvP build. It's not meta breaking. Again, it's not what everyone's going to be running around using, but all it takes really is running 2 different guns. If you run an SASG and then an M870, without switching anything, you can go from fighting NPCs super effectively to fighting players super effectively, or you could just go into your inventory really quickly and switch it up. Now, as you can see, I am extremely far away from that sniper and still landing almost all of my pellets and stacking my bonus. From that distance with a shotgun, I am stacking my bonus, which to me is phenomenal and gives it that versatility. Again, I don't have to be up close and personal with NPCs. I don't have to be right in their face, because they can kill me from there a lot faster than I can kill them, even with something like a maxed out M870. An NPC really just requires a few shots on you to kill you. I think that running over 400,000 toughness is ideal. It's good to do. This build checks that off. I think that also, you know, having that optimal range, you know, having the accuracy so the reticle is tight is also critical for being able to sit farther back, stack your bonus, and then when they do get closer, deal a lot of increased damage as soon as they step into your optimal range, where you're dealing, you know, well over 140, 150, 160,000 per pellet. And if there's 8 pellets, that's, you know, extremely competitive damage. So that's going to be about it, guys. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links below. Again, just going to show the build right here. The primary DPS, the toughness, and the skill power. If you do want to support the channel and what we're doing, there are a lot of ways to do that. The Patreon has new rewards, etc., etc. The t-shirts for 15,000 are no longer offered, so thanks to everyone who purchased those. And as always, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.